What was the patented methodology that Nelson used to secure victory at the Battle of Cape St. Vincent? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 53 of the Principles of War podcast. Nelson, Mission Command, and the Battle of Cape St. Vincent, Part 2.
This is the Principles of War podcast, professional military education for junior officers and senior NCOs.
So, the decks are clear, the guns are run out, the enemy is spotted, we are all ready to get back into the action that is the Battle of Cape St. Vincent. Make sure you check out the show notes for this because we've got some maps that highlight these maneuvers. I'm going to try and explain them. It is quite complicated. The maps are going to make it a whole lot easier to sort of understand that. So check out the show notes. You'll get an idea of what it is that we're talking about as we go along. Without further ado, here we go. So at this point, the Spanish Weather Division is to the west of the line of battle, of the British line of battle, and the Lee Division is to the east. Culloden at this point tacks to reverse her course and basically forms a V and starts heading towards the north, which is the direction that the Spanish fleet is sailing in. So the Spanish Weather Division. Culloden is followed by Blenheim and then Prince George, and they do the same. They turn at the same point. The Spanish Lee Division tries to break through at this point where the British ships are turning, and on two occasions they are rebuffed, taking significant damage. One of the gunners on HMS Goliath was to later write, "We gave them their Valentine in style." So a good portion of the Spanish fleet has been denied the opportunity to join up with the main fleet. The main fleet is now heading to the north, and it is sailing by the line of battle of the British that is still heading south. They're heading towards that point, at which point they will tack and turn back up to the north to follow. Nelson can see this. He is towards the end of the line of battle, and he can also see that it is going to be a problem for the British ships as they try to catch the Spanish ships from moving to the north. And remember, we're fighting before the age of steam, so wind is a really important factor in this battle. The wind is pretty much from the west, so it's not the most efficient way that they could be travelling. It is going to be hard sailing for Culloden to catch the Spanish fleet. On top of that, all of the guns are pointing out to the side. They've got very few guns to the front and to the rear. So it's going to be difficult for the British ships to be able to bring fire to bear on the Spanish, unless something is done. At 1:05, Jarvis hoists the signal, "Take suitable stations for mutual support and engage the enemy as coming up in succession." Nelson can see the Spanish fleet as it moves to the north because he's heading south. They're not that far away. He can see Culloden in the distance trying to catch up. Nelson interprets the order to take suitable stations for mutual support and engage the enemy as coming up in succession loosely at best. He ignores the previous orders, the form line of battle, that order that has been followed by every other ship. He completely ignores that. Well, ignores/disobeys. And for the latest order, as coming up in succession, we'll ignore that bit of the order as well. We're just pretty much going to take suitable stations for mutual support. When he says take suitable stations for mutual support, let's see what he does with that bit. So he orders the captain of his ship. So Nelson at this point's a Commodore. He's got a captain. That's Captain Ralph Miller. He says to Captain Miller to wear ship. So he actually turns the ship around and they actually sail towards the Lee Division. So the smaller division that's had a couple of attempts at trying to break through the British line. They're slowly moving up to the north. HMS Captain moves towards them, circles around, gives them a couple of broadsides for their trouble. Receives a bit of damage in return, and then it sails in between the two last ships in the line, which is Diadem and Excellent. He's now on a collision course with the centre of the Spanish Weather Division. This group, it's got the Santissima Trinidad. That's the largest ship afloat at the time. It's got 130 guns. He's got 74 guns. Not only that, the San Jose, she's 112. Salvador del Mundi, that's 112. San Nicolas, 84. San Isidro, 74. And the Mexicano, 112. He sails right into the middle of them. His intent is to stop the movement of them, to slow them up, to give Culloden, the rest of the van, a chance to catch up to the Spanish fleet. So it's quite interesting when you have a look at his actions. So Jarvis's order, take suitable stations for mutual support and engage the enemy as coming up in succession. As coming up in succession, no, we're not going to do that. Mutual support, I think it's a really wide amount of latitude that you need to be able to see this as mutual support. This is mutual support at the much higher level than you'd normally think of the mutual support. And so the only bit that really is kind of applicable is take suitable stations, if by that Admiral Jarvis had meant right smack bang in the middle of the Spanish fleet. This is pretty much the Leroy Jenkins moment of the battle. Excellent and Diadem follow. Culloden starts to catch up. HMS Captain is now well and truly in the thick of it and is under fire from as many of 6 of the ships in the Spanish centre. Captain Collingwood in HMS Culloden comes up to support HMS Captain, and a general melee ensues at very close range, pistol range. So we're talking ships of the line with their broadsides firing at very, very close range. Culloden takes incredible damage, and Captain is almost a complete wreck. Excellent was heavily engaged with the San Nicolas, which had had its foretop mast shot away. Excellent was firing broadsides into San Nicolas and then made sail to clear ahead of it. To avoid ramming the Excellent, the San Nicolas luffed up and ran into San Jose, which had suffered the loss of its mizzenmast and other significant damage. So the Captain, almost out of control, it had the wheel shot away, and at this point its foretop mast fell over the side, leaving it completely unmanageable. The San Nicolas and the San Jose are stuck together, and the Captain hits the San Nicolas. At 3:20, Nelson cries, "Westminster Abbey or glorious victory," and he orders boarders to cross to the San Nicolas. He later wrote, "The soldiers of the 69th, with an alacrity that will ever do them credit, and Lieutenant Pearson of the same regiment, were almost the foremost on this service. The first man who jumped into the enemy's mizzen chains was Commander Berry, my late first lieutenant. Captain Miller was in the very act of going also, but I directed him to remain. He was supported from our spritsail yard, which took into the mizzen rigging. A soldier of the 69th Regiment, having broken the upper quarter galley window, I jumped in myself and was followed by others as fast as possible. I found the cabin doors fastened and some Spanish officers fired their pistols, but having broke open the doors, the soldiers fired and the Spanish brigadier fell as retreating to the quarterdeck. I pushed immediately onwards for the quarterdeck, where I found Commander Berry in possession of the poop and the Spanish ensign hauling down. I passed with my people and Lieutenant Pearson on the larboard gangway to the forecastle, where I met 2 or 3 Spanish officers, prisoners to my seamen. They delivered me their swords. A fire of pistols or muskets opening from the stern gallery of the San Jose, I directed the soldiers to fire into her stern, and calling to Captain Miller, ordered him to send more men into the San Nicolas, and directed my people to board the first rate, which was done in an instant. Commander Berry assisting me into the main chains. At this moment, a Spanish officer looked over the quarterdeck rail and said they surrendered. From this most welcome intelligence, it was not long before I was on the quarterdeck, where the captain, with a bow, presented me his sword, and said the admiral was dying of his wounds. I asked him on his honour if the ship was surrendered. He declared she was, on which I gave him my hand and desired him to call his officers and ship's company and tell them of it, which he did. And on the quarterdeck of a Spanish first rate, extravagant as the story may seem, did I receive the swords of vanquished Spaniards. So this was quite a unique occurrence in the history of the Royal Navy. So Nelson had gone from HMS Victory onto San Nicolas, and from San Nicolas on to San Jose. He had captured 2 Spanish ships, and the second one had been captured from the first. This would become famous as Nelson's patent bridge for boarding first rates. It was an incredible victory. Not only had Jarvis won a victory when outnumbered almost 2-1, but it had come at a time of significant unrest in the Royal Navy. And in fact, when the message was delivered to the Admiralty, they feared that it was another story of another mutiny. They dare not think that it was an engagement that had been so successful. So what were the lessons? How did we get to this great victory? Well, we start off with, as we do so many times, with training. The Royal Navy had better seamen, they had better officers. They had manoeuvred in 2 columns into one line of battle, while the Spanish remained separated. They had better gunnery. They had better morale. Terry Coleman, in his book The Nelson Touch, writes, "The Spanish made very fine ships, but they were shockingly manned. Some, with a crew of 800, had only 80 experienced seamen, and the rest were landsmen or soldiers. Their rate of fire was often only a fifth of that of the British, and Jarvis's opinion of the Spanish was that no English officer with tolerable nerves should be under any apprehension from them. Ill-manned, worse appointed, and beaten in imagination before they leave port." The lack of skill and discipline overnight had meant that the Spanish fleet had drifted apart into 2 separate groups. This gave Jarvis the opportunity that he needed. They were unable to manoeuvre whilst in combat to enable them to develop a line of battle, which meant that many of the Spanish ships were unable to engage the British without causing damage to their own ships. Also, after the San Jose was captured, it was found that some of her guns still had their tampions in their muzzles, so the crews hadn't even attempted to run out the guns and get them ready to fire. What of Nelson? What of his loose interpretation of orders? Well, what of his ignoring of orders? This, for me, is where we get a great lesson in mission command, and we're going to look at moral courage. Nelson, as a Royal Navy officer, was subject to the Articles of War 1757, which is the equivalent of our standing orders today. I draw your attention to Article 12. Every person in the fleet who through cowardice, negligence or disaffection shall in time of action withdraw or keep back or not come into a fight or engagement or shall not do his utmost to take or destroy every ship which it shall be his duty to engage and to assist and relieve all and every of his majesty's ships or those of his allies which it shall be his duty to assist and relieve, every such person so offending and being convicted thereof by the sentence of a court-martial, shall suffer death. He's a Commodore in the Royal Navy, so surely that wouldn't apply to him. Or does it? The permanent fighting instructions of 1744 stipulated a line of battle in which ideally British ships should engage enemy ships broadside to broadside. Admiral Byng in 1756 had been shot for disobeying these instructions. Now, Voltaire wrote that this was to encourage the others. However, and it was quite a political shooting, nonetheless, a Royal Navy admiral was shot after being court-martialed for disobeying orders. So disobeying orders, it was significantly riskier back in these times. Winning is pretty important in mission command. And we've seen that with Brigadier Ulf Henriksen in Nordbat 2. And he spoke of, well, I was victorious and that really helped my case. That's what he said when he was disobeying orders. Well, actually, I shouldn't say disobeying, interpreting moderately loosely. At this point, I'd like to bring it back to doctrine, and let's have a look at some Royal Australian Navy doctrine. And so in their leadership ethic document, they talk about mission command and leadership. The ADF command philosophy, known as mission command, expects subordinate commanders to be given a clear sense of superior command intent, a clear articulation of desired results, tasks to be undertaken, and constraints. Mission Command Doctrine expects flexibility, initiative, and resourcefulness in the pursuit of commander's intent. Mission Command emphasises the importance of individual judgment and confident delegation. Understanding the concept is crucial as the Navy participates invariably in joint and combined operations. Mission Command Doctrine expects flexibility, initiative, and resourcefulness in the pursuit of the commander's intent. So what was Jarvis's intent as he ordered that tack around for Culloden to follow on to the Spanish fleet. So he had a significant advantage. He was outnumbered, but the two groups were separated, so they weren't able to mutually support themselves that well. He wanted to run down the larger group and he wanted to destroy them. Nelson could see that that wasn't going to occur, or it wasn't going to occur too effectively, just because of the fact that Culloden wasn't going to be able to engage the Spanish with her broadsides, let alone any of the ships behind her, unless the Spanish could have been slowed down. The doctrine of mission command requires leaders who acknowledge no rigid doctrinal way to lead. For mission command to succeed, superior and subordinate commanders must operate within a shared ethical framework, each confident that the other will pursue missions in good conscience and in accord with the ideals of the military profession. Without an ethical foundation, mission command will fail. Nelson and Jarvis had served together for a significant amount of time. Jarvis understood the brilliance of Nelson, and Nelson understood that he would reward those who were actively working to further the goals of the Royal Navy. Mission Command demands confidence and responsible freedom of action. Mission Command will be inspired by leadership, which applies doctrine intelligently and flexibly, but not dogmatically. Leaders cultivate Mission Command by accurate operational evaluation, candid capture of lessons learned, open-minded discussion of honest mistakes as opportunities for learning and professional development, and open-minded consideration of unorthodox ideas. So the way that Nelson interpreted the orders, that was clearly unorthodox. But the important thing I think to remember in this is that this engagement, prior to this, Nelson had failed on a couple of occasions. There'd been some land engagements, some storming of positions that he had led that hadn't gone overly well. He'd learnt from those, and his career had been allowed to prosper because of the fact that people could see his qualities and they could see his capabilities and potential. This is probably one of the areas where I think there could be significant improvement. Candid capture of lessons learned. It's very hard to actively look at and create an environment not only for introspection into the mistakes that you have made, but to openly canvass feedback on how those mistakes could have been better handled in an environment where potentially your career could be significantly affected by making a mistake. How many times do we have open-minded discussion about honest mistakes as opportunities for learning and professional development? Or how often do we try and gloss over them in an effort to protect ourselves? I think that's an interesting question. There's also a very interesting little paragraph here, which talks about command, the ADF mission, responsibility and accountability. The ADF mission is to defend Australia and its national interests. The Navy mission is to fight and win in the maritime environment. These missions are the raison d'etre of all command authority. Subordinate missions assigned to any commander must contribute to the achievement of the ADF and Navy missions. These missions frame command responsibility for the successful achievement of missions and for the safe, efficient employment of people and resources. A commander is accountable for success or failure in the discharge of these responsibilities, the fulfillment of which will be aligned to the Navy's vision to be renowned for excellence in service to the nation. While a commander may delegate authority in whole or in part, neither the ethical responsibility of leadership nor the formal accountability for command can be delegated at any time. The important sentence out of that is that these missions are the raison d'etre of all command authority. Subordinate missions assigned to any commander must contribute to the achievement of the ADF and Navy missions. What would Nelson say about that? How do you think he would feel about it? If he was here to ask, I think that he would answer something like this, because this is actually something that he wrote. To say that an officer is never, for any object, to alter his orders is what I cannot comprehend. The circumstances of this war so often vary that an officer has almost every moment to consider what would my superiors direct did they know what was passing under my nose. But, sir, I find few think as I do. To obey orders is all perfection. To serve my king and to destroy the French I consider as the greatest order of all, from which little orders spring. And if one of these militate against it, for who can tell exactly at a distance, I go back and obey the great order and object. To down with the damned French villains. My blood boils with the name of Frenchman. Has Nelson not, in the context of the Royal Navy and in the context of the war against Napoleon, paraphrased, the ADF mission is to defend Australia and its national interests. The Navy mission is to fight and win in the maritime environment. These missions are the raison d'etre for all command authority. Subordinate missions assigned to any commander must contribute to the achievement of the ADF and Navy missions. So that's really quite nicely and concisely written. However, I think that Nelson has expressed a very similar ideal in what it is that he has said. To obey orders is all perfection. To serve my king and to destroy the French, I consider as the greatest order of all, from which little orders spring. With those words of wisdom from Lord Horatio Nelson, ladies and gentlemen, I will leave you. We will return with the next episode in our Mission Command and Lord Nelson series, where we are going to look at probably his greatest victory, the Battle of the Nile.
The Principles of War podcast is brought to you by James Ealing. The show notes for the Principles of War podcast are available at www.theprinciplesofwar.com for maps, photos and other information that didn't make it into the podcast. Follow us on Facebook or tweet us at Surprise Podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes and tag a mate in on one of our episodes. All opinions expressed by individuals are those of those individuals and not of any organisation.